No? Okay.
Not yet watched the recording, so I don't.
Don't have any questions.
Yeah.
Okay. And then has anything come up sensory wise in treatment sessions that we need to kind of cover?
I had one kid last week who um, his mom was saying how he has a tendency to, like, when he's like listening to an audiobook or something, he'll hang his head upside down, or like, whenever he wants to, he'll just hang his head upside down.
Cool.
And so, like, I talked to Sam about that, and she said, like, it sounds like he's vestibular seeking. So I started giving the mom a couple of the pre-astronaut exercises, the vestibular activities to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. And that's really intuitive in the sense that if he's putting his head like this or upside down, and we can give him that opportunity to put it upside down in different positions, right, in a more natural way, he will hopefully seek it less. However,
Yeah.
at least he's doing it when he's at home and
Yeah.
listening to an audiobook versus at school and trying to be in a handstand.
Well, supposedly he runs around a lot at school. He can't sit still. He's also 6 years old and he's in first grade. And yeah, so, like, I don't know how much of it is sensory, or is it like him just being a 6-year-old child,
A good deal of both, probably, because my 2-year-old doesn't run around uncontrollably. He definitely does run around, but when he can attend to something and it's the good activity, he can do it.
Yeah.
And that's how I've started measuring. Because some days I'm like, no, that's not expected.
Yeah.
How do I close this? Hold on.
Hi guys.
Hello. Good timing. It's okay. I'm running very late today, so we'll have a shorter one today, and that's just how it's gonna have to be. I think I'm gonna have to push it to like 7:15 on a regular basis because my toddler sucks. We'll just go there. Right? Bedtime is not, oh, let's read a book and I'll be calm. It's, let's go to the bathroom. No! Water! Elmo, teeth. And I'm like, what? What's happening? There's much yelling. Okay, so.
You okay?
How do I turn this on again? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Okay, so auditory, because this is where we had kind of left off last time, right, Kinza? Do you remember? This is where we were gonna like explore this time.
Yeah, we had just finished visual, I think. So we
Perfect. And so auditory system, this one comes up a lot, right? We've got a lot of kids who are sensitive to sound. It's one of the primary reasons for referral for our very, strictly sensory kids. And obviously the receptor location is your inner ear, sound waves, it's your cochlea, right? So it's different than the vestibular system. Sorry, still sleep deprived, which has the inner ear canals. Now, what's important to note is that it's the same fluid that goes through both. So that's why sound can affect the vestibular system, right? The same fluid is affected, right? The same cilia are moving in the different areas. It's just that different stimulation is provided to each system in order to get a response. Kids who get a lot of ear infections, right? That to me is a red flag. I'm interested in that. Kids who have had tubes in the past, who are currently using tubes, have had multiple sets of tubes, right? A lot of these kiddos, when they're younger, well, we're going to do this. I'm going to push through. And so when they're younger and they have a speech delay, one of the first things a doctor will do is send them for ENT to check the fluid on the ears. And then if they do have fluid on the ears, they're going to provide them with tubes to try to drain it, because it's often blocking the sound that's coming into the ear. Right? And to the point where some people have actually tested as if they were deaf, but they were not. It was just fluid blocking the system from working. But they don't always consider the vestibular system, because if you have fluid and pressure and pain in the inner ear, it's not just the cochlea that's affected, it's also your inner ear canals, right? So often these kiddos have an issue with balance. Or when kids get an ear infection, maybe their balance will be off and they'll bump into things and they'll fall over, and parents question that. And they say, why is this happening? It's super interesting. So your pressure, pain, anything that kind of applies to one part of the ear will apply to the other. So always something to keep in mind, that it's not necessarily just auditory, it could also be vestibular, okay? Just like to kind of throw that out there. But when we're talking about the sound system, the auditory, right, it's the sound waves that are coming in and they provide information about the environment, loud, soft, high, low, near, far. A lot of the work we do with noise is in like animal sounds, bird noises, noises that are natural to the environment, because that increases our awareness of the environment. Oh, excuse me. Wow, it's gonna be a long presentation if I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Okay. So hypersensitivity, right, or auditory defensiveness. We react as though the noise levels are magnified, right? These are the kids who cover their ears a lot and frequently. They engage in unusual behaviors in noisy environments, usually in an attempt to get away or avoid or stop the noise. They're highly aware of all environment noises. Okay, so these are the kids who they want to know. They say, well, what noises are they going to have? Or is this the one where the bell is going to ring? Is it going to be loud in the arena? They're very aware and alert. And they're often anxious before expected noises like the school bell, or a kiddo that was recently evaluated who literally spent 3 hours an anxious mess waiting for the fire drill at school, right? They knew it was going to happen and he was prepared, but he prepared himself by being an anxious mess in an attempt to, deal with the fact that there was going to be this horrible, horrible noise for a long period of time. Holding hands over the ears, they dislike loud noises and they are easily startled. Okay. Oh, wow. So I'm sorry, I didn't sleep much last night. There's definitely been no naps. So the moral reflex that we have kind of touched on in the past, it's our startle reflex. This one is highly active with the auditory system. Auditory, vestibular, tactile, all of these systems have a really quick link with that moral reflex. So when you hear a loud noise, it's happened to all of us, right? You hear a car backfire, a door slam, right? The terrible brother who jumps out from behind the door to scare you and make you almost pee your pants, right? That has happened to all of us, right? If it's not your brother, it's a cousin, it's somebody has done it to you, right? And we all startle, your heart races, you've got shortness of breath. Sometimes we have butterflies, we feel sick to our stomach. Any of those feelings can happen. And imagine if you feel that over and over and over throughout the day or throughout the week, your body really wants to avoid that horrible feeling, right? It's going to start causing anxiety because it's a terrible feeling. So now you're worried that it's going to happen all the time. It's a really natural response. So a lot of our kids who are sensitive to sound have, anxious reactions. They worry. They are very defensive. Maybe they get angry, right? So there's a lot of behavioral things that are associated with the sound. It's important too to know there's something called misophonia. So misophonia is a dislike of hearing other people eat or chew. So they don't like mouth noises. That's a thing. A lot of kids have it. And
My boyfriend has it.
There you go. So we've treated it for a lot of kids. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Some of the stuff we could talk about today would actually help with it. Right? There are therapeutic
listening in the background. So.
Yeah. And imagine, right? Like the most important social engagements all are around the kitchen and around food, right? So going to a restaurant, going to a birthday party, going to a ball game or to the hockey game, people are going to eat popcorn, they're going to eat hot dogs, right? Everything involves food. So think about that for your feeding kids and for our kids who are sensitive to the sound of chewing. It is so hard to participate in social activities. You have to work 10 times harder, which is exhausting, right? So those kids who are able to overcome it, using a variety of strategies, either eating on their own, which often happens, engaging in sound dampening earphone activities, covering their ears, any kind of sound dampening activity to allow them to engage at the table is really good, but it's also something that will stand out in social situations. So for our kids who are already probably a little bit weird, that's a big concern, right? So one of the kids that I work with, he just started high school and he does not want to stand out. So any of the things that have worked in the past are not going to work because it means he's different. So we have to revisit all sorts of things. He's like, well, kids have earbuds. I can have earbuds. And his mom's like, I'm not spending $300 for earbud pros, right? AirBuds, what? AirPods, right? AirPods, those things. Okay, and smart kid. But the implications are big as opposed to it just being a sound thing. Okay, so we'll talk about what we can do about it after. Hyposensitivity. These are the kids who really like loud noises, right? These are the opposite kids. They fail to pick up on unexpected auditory cues. So, or sorry, not unexpected, unexpected, right? So they'll be in the middle of doing an activity at school and the teacher starts talking, but they're not going to cue into it. So they're going to miss the instruction because they're really focused on what they're doing. They make unusual noises. They seek out irritable noises. They may become more engaged in noisier environments. And they do not always respond when their name is called. Hyposensitivity can sometimes be confused with poor auditory processing. Okay, so the auditory processing is our ability to understand what is said. So sometimes it takes longer to process all that information to understand it. I definitely have that difficulty. I live it. I would probably qualify for auditory processing disorder should I evaluate myself. But I have functional strategies, and so far, I'm functional. So I haven't had to, but I always had 60 in français écoute. Okay, I had 90s and everything else. I had 100 sometimes, but I had 60 across the board in French listening. And my mom would be like, "What's the deal?" I'm like, "Oh, they play this terrible tape and they only play it 2 times and I'm still reading the question and I haven't figured out yet what they've said." And like, it was just a disaster, right? I was an anxious mess when this happened every time. If somebody spells out a word, like, you know how when you're trying to talk to another adult and a kid is around and you want to say ice cream, but you don't want to say ice cream, right? So you write it out, you're like, I-C-E-K. You can't do that with me because you have to go slow enough that I can write it in my head and read it back to myself in order to understand the word, right? If I'm on the phone and somebody else starts talking to me, I don't hear either of them because I'm just like, whoa, too much, right? So there's a lot of auditory stuff that can be really functionally limiting, either undersensitive, over responsive, or poor processing. And it's just about looking at what the stuff is and slotting it into what fits where, so you can understand which system you're targeting.
So sorry, I'm going to interrupt real quick just because I have to go and just want to say bye.
Bye, Yas.
See you in a bit.
I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, yes.
Bye.
Is it less common to have the hyposensitive ones? I just feel like on the intake calls, I don't hear that as much as like hypersensitive to noise and putting hands over ears and that kind of thing.
It stands out less, right? So might cause less problems, less social issues. Maybe they think they're just not listening, right? Which is frustrating, but they're like, well, we can't help, right? So it's more, they treat it as more of a behavior. So yes, 100%, there's less referrals. I don't know if it's less common, but I think it is less treated.
Okay.
When there is a processing issue, you're going to see more referrals for it because these are the kids that are maybe missing the second and third step in 3-step instructions. These are the kids who they really don't hear somebody calling their name, right? So someone actually has to come over and tap them in order to get their attention, which can be really annoying in a classroom. They don't look like they're paying attention, right? Because they aren't. And so the other important thing, though, to consider is that when you have issues tuning in and tuning out, that can happen. So a good example is me. Again, I like to use examples of myself. I do it in intake calls too and talk to parents. But when I was younger, still now, if I'm in a book, I love to read and I'm very visual because obviously auditory has always been my weak point. And I would be in a book, I'd be reading, and my mom would come in, like, be right in my face, like, "Stephanie, why aren't you listening?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "I've been yelling your name for 10 minutes, right?" But I did not hear her at all. I was in the zone of the book and my visual system was working and it had tuned all the other systems out, right? Because that system was the one that was working. And that happens too. And the other thing I kind of forgot to mention for hypersensitivity, and I probably should put it somehow here, but you can have hypersensitivity in 2 ways. You can have that reaction to sudden noises, right? Sudden, loud, unexpected noises. You can also have an overreaction to noisy environments over time. And when you think about it that way, you're going to think of a kid at a birthday party, right? And initially it looks like they're having a really good time. They're having, like, it's their friends are all there. They're playing games. They're engaged in the activity. And then maybe 2 hours in, an hour in, they start to get irritable. And then there's this one, like, last straw. Maybe somebody bumps into them or they sing happy birthday, or there's, a noise in the other room, but it's their last straw, their limit, and they lose it. And that's when you see the meltdown. And it's not necessarily the trigger. That's the problem, right? The problem is that they have just spent 2 hours tolerating all of this really hard sensory input in order to engage in the fun social activity they want. But that was their limit, right? Their tank is full, so they can't do it anymore. And so that happens. And it's a different way of looking at it, but it is still an over responsiveness to the auditory system. All right. So tips for caregivers. So these are important things that we can recommend to parents. We can also use them. So preparing a child for a noisy environment sounds really simple, right? Super commonsensical. But telling somebody that, hey, it's going to be really noisy at the birthday party, then they can, prepare themselves for the activity and be ready. You can get them warmed up and ready by using heavy work to prepare before entering a noisy environment. So that's a really good one, right? If we know we're going to have an assembly at school, then the teacher can provide some animal walks. They can provide heavy things for the child to walk with and carry going to the assembly. Sorry, baby crying. It's amazing how sensitive your hearing is when you are tuned to a crying baby. That is like you pick up on that. I used to sleep like the dead. Okay, like Daniel had gastro and I didn't even wake up. Right, he'd be up and in and out of bed all night. Nothing. I was like, "You were sick last night?" Okay, yes. And then I had a baby, and I wake up all the time, no problem. And I never thought I would. It's amazing. So using heavy work, super useful. Teach parents how to do that. If they're going to go to the movies, they're going to go to a friend's house where there might be noise. If they prepare the body, get the child as organized as they can be, they can tolerate it for longer than they would without that organization. Using headphones or sound dampening earmuffs to dampen down the level of noise for the child is another really good strategy. There's tons, right? There's this lovely picture of different kinds. They also have now I can't remember what they're called. We have them at the clinic. They're small, like about this size, and they just stick a little bit out of the ear. I will try to remember what those are called and tell you afterwards. They were created initially.
Like something vibe, I think.
Vibes.
Yeah.
Vibes.
Vibe.
Yeah, vibes. I think that is exactly what they're called. And they were created in order to help protect your ear from concerts. That was one of the reasons they initially created it. And then people with autism found out about it and said, hey, these are great. I can wear these without looking, different. It just looks like earphones or AirPods. And so
How much do they dampen the sound?
You'd have to give it a try. It's different for everybody, right? Because everyone has different sensitivity levels, and there's 3 different sizes. But if you have the right mix, it's quite good. Not completely. You're definitely still going to hear what's going on. That is a crying baby. He's not happy. It's dodo time. And so some kids like it because it just dampens it enough that they can stand it. Other kids find that it's not enough. So it's a mix, right? I had one kid who did better with the sound dampening earmuffs that they bought at the hardware store, the ones that you wear for like construction sites for the saw and all the other big things that I can't think of what they're called right now, jackhammer, like all those things that could, very much damage your ears. They preferred that. The cool thing about the headphones versus the vibes is that they also provide deep pressure when they push on the ears, right? And on the head. So for some kids who don't like wearing earphones, that's not going to fly. But other kids who prefer the deep pressure, it's going to be their preferred choice. So before suggesting it or encouraging parents to buy one of them, we let them try. Okay, it's the best way to practice it.
They can't try the vibes, but they can try the heavy headphones.
So I've always let them try the vibes, and then I
do we have it? Oh, okay, so we can.
Yeah, we
COVID is complicated.
Well, yes and no. Like you just clean it like you would anything else. So use dish soap and water, and that'll be fine for those because it's also just going in the ear, right? They're not like putting it up their nose or really getting into like the mucus zones. But no, I would just clean it with soap and water. Not an antibacterial because it'll probably fall apart if we do that too often. So we want to teach the child strategies within the noisy environment, right? So there's tricks that we can work. We can stand close to the door. I think I have another one where, a code word, right? So agree on methods for the child to tell you there is too much noise. Have a code word, have token exchange, right? So that it doesn't look strange or them saying like, oh, the loud noise is too much because other kids might question that. You can have a system that works between the parents and the child or the caregiver and the child. You encourage the child to attend to sounds by playing games based on auditory cues. I think we talked about how I worked on smell by giving a child control over it. You can do the same with sound. So if you practice recognizing noises, right, there's tons of auditory files on YouTube, so many. And you can just have a listen. So say, okay, this is an elephant, this is a train, right? This is the sound of different bells. but you can have it on a low volume and let them get used to it and have them turn up the volume and down the volume to try to play with it. So there's ways to, oh my gosh, not desensitize. There's a better word that I'm looking for. Acclimatize to it, I guess would be a good one, right? Get used to it and get control over it. So if you can identify the noise, it's not so scary.
Do we have the sound bingo in the clinic?
No, we don't. And it mostly because this is a very old
fine.
game. I haven't been able to find it. And you can find a lot of these sounds on the internet. Right? So you can actually find different sounds of it. We could probably make our own sound bingo, but I've never had to actually play the bingo game with kids. They kind of prefer playing with the noises and trying to recognize them. And, you know, we'll blindfold them, we'll close our eyes and try to guess, and I'll let them pick a sound and I have to guess, and we go back and forth like that.
And you do that kind of pinning pictures and they like get to choose the sound, like what?
Well, most of the kids are verbal that I do this with, so they would tell me what it was. But if it's a nonverbal or a younger child, you can definitely put the pictures. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so auditory, right? How do we treat it? Because that's a big one. I always start with the body. Even before I really go towards the, you know, the music therapies and the listening therapies, the better organized our body is, the easier it will be to tolerate unnecessary or unexpected sensory input, right? So I will often do the Wilbarger brushing, even for auditory, right? Not just for tactile. Have I talked about all of these things yet? I don't think I talked about tons of stuff we could do for tactile. Eh? So for tactile, for auditory, for vestibular, over responsiveness, anything where our body's going into high alert and an uncomfortable state of organization, I will often use the Wilbarger protocol. So it's not just for kids who are having trouble with tags, right, or refusing to wear certain types of clothing. I want to provide it not necessarily to desensitize the skin in these situations, but to provide deep pressure and proprioceptive input in a very intense, measured way. So my goal when I'm looking at organization and self-regulation, as we talked about, was helping their body feel better and organized and make that part of their normal day, right? Their regular feeling, so that it doesn't feel like it's different than what they're expected to feel. So when we look at it from a kind of common sense standpoint, the Wilbarger protocol provides a very big dose of calming input in a small amount of time, right? It is also a small little brush, so it's not an expensive piece of material that we need, and it travels well. So you don't have to, you know, lug a big therapy ball in the car to provide somebody with some sensory input. You can put a brush in your purse and pull it out, and it's easy to do anywhere. So it's a very functional, you know, sensory regulating activity. It's much easier for everybody to learn how to do the brush in person. So that's something that we'll do in person. Either, you know, myself or somebody in the clinic who's trained can show you how. We also have the Wilbarger protocol written out, right? English and French. So good for you to have to review back to, but also to share with the parents.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Regarding the Wilbarger, what is the flexibility? Because like I was telling my Jonathan Cote's mom, so because I'd reviewed it with Sam and I'd reviewed it with Alexia, and it was nice, or Yas, and then Alexia, and like it's just like, okay, well, you do first the forearms and the hands and the back of the legs, and then the not the back of the legs, the
lower leg,
lower part of the legs,
lower, yeah,
the
lower
feet.
leg.
Yeah, and then you do compression. She's like, and it was just like, that's a lot. Is there any wiggle room in terms of the fingers, and then there's the back, and then there's there's a few elements in terms of the compression, at least. Is there wiggle room?
What I always tell families is once you have practiced it, it takes less than 5 minutes to do, right? It's really not long. It shouldn't be like 18 times around, right? Three is a really good number. So I start at the bottom and I work my way up. So I always do the shins first, right? The lower leg. So if this was for my arm, I'd have the brush and I would go around like this, right? And that's 1, 2, 3. If I want to take a long time, I'll do 1, 2, 3. But normally I go 1, 2, 3. And then I move on to the next one. 1, 2, 3, right? And you're just going up and down. So it really doesn't take that long. And then you do the hands. I always start at the bottom because I don't want to forget anything. And I find it organizing for the child not to be jumping around, not doing arms, then legs, then back, right? I start at the legs and the feet, and then I go to the arms, then I go to the back, because I'm just working my way up. And I'm going to do the same for the compressions. I start at the feet and I work my way up to the top. Just so they know what's coming next, because that can help kids who are maybe uncomfortable with it. Hold on, is he screaming? Is he not hungry anymore? He wouldn't take the bottle? No? Maybe, did he burp? Yeah? Yeah, did you read a story with him and everything? Yeah. Sorry. Screaming psycho baby. Problem solving, right? Have we tried
First
all
or
of
the
the things?
second or both? First, second, or both? You said psycho baby.
Oh, the little
Max.
one. I was like, what? What? It was first, second, or both? No, the little one. Max is probably talking in his bed, but you can't hear him because the baby's so loud. So it's a bonus.
When they sit and talk in their bed alone.
Yeah,
That's so
that's what he
cute.
does, and he plays with his tutus, right? And you'll hear him go like, "No, my bear, no, my," it's hilarious. That's his current thing. Anything you say, he'll say, "No, mine, no, mine." Oh, look at the banana. No, my banana. Alex will say, "Oh, that's my food. No, my food," and everything. You're like, okay, we get it. You're two, and everything's yours. But this is quite something. Yeah, so for the Wilbarger protocol, right, there's wiggle room, but I wouldn't cut it out. Like, you can't just do the brushing and not do the compressions. And a lot of parents do that, but it's not as effective. And it's important, because then you're only touching on one sensory system, not on the proprioceptive system. I would almost find that the compressions provide more input, right? A lot of kids really, really like the compressions. Some really like the brushing too, but it's the combination that provides the really intense input. But when you do it, Laura, how long does it take you to do it to a child?
I don't think I've ever fully done it beginning to end. Because usually they ask me to stop at a certain point.
Okay, so we need to have you practice both on like maybe myself or on Sam, like to do the full thing, each step, to see how long it takes. Because honestly, if you do it efficiently and quickly, like 3 minutes, right? It's really not a long process, but it's a lot for maybe parents to process and remember and organize to do. So instead of sending them home after just one practice, you can maybe have them practice on you. That's what I do. So when I teach it, I do it on the child first, so the parent observes how the child relaxes, right? And a lot of them are like, oh, show me how you just hypnotized my child. And then I do it to the parent, right? Because some of them really do, right? Like, they literally melt into like these lymph noodles, right? And just they're like, oh, and then their hands follow you, right? When you try to move the brush away. And so the next step would be to do it to the parent, so that they feel what it is. And I don't always do the full process to the parents. I've done it to the child so they could see all of it, but I do the brush on the hand. I do it on their arm. I want to show that going vertically feels really bad. That's why we do it in the horizontal way, so that they can feel the difference. And then I show them how to do it, and then I have them do it to me, because I want to make sure that they're using the correct amount of pressure. And you'll see they all do it slower than you do it, right? Because I literally go really nice pace. It's not a slow thing. They're going to go really careful because they're learning something new, right? So you're going to encourage them and say, that's really good, but you know what? You can push a little harder, and you can probably go a little bit faster. And they're like, really? I can push harder? I'm like, and the kids are going to tell you to push harder. They like the pressure. And so
I did that with mom.
Yeah.
Sorry, with my mom, but I and I had her practice on me. But I think I still have doubts, so it's definitely better that I practice with you also, or with Sam.
Yeah, so ask Sam if you're able, and then next time I see you, we'll do it too. Honestly, it is a confidence thing. So if you feel comfortable doing it, the kids will feel comfortable receiving it, and the parents will listen to what you say. It's really, and if you're not super sure, right, fake it till you make it. Just pretend you're really sure, because then the parent receives this confidence and they will be more likely to do it. If you're like, oh yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, the parents will be like, well, why am I doing this if it doesn't always work, right? Even though it does sometimes.
That I don't say.
No, I know, but I'm just kind of giving an example.
Yeah.
And the speed with which we do it does come from confidence as well, right? Because then you know how you're doing it. You can have a conversation while you're doing it instead of thinking about what you're doing. It becomes really automatic. So it leaves me some brain space left to be able to talk to the kids to distract them. This was how my day went today, or I tell them a funny story, or what are you going to be for Halloween, right? Just pick anything that you want to talk about that goes with their interests or the time of year, the seasonal topics that you have. And it distracts them enough to be able to tolerate it longer, especially for our really sensitive kids, right? Our tactile defensive kids. The other thing to remember is when we are going to do something like the Wilbarger protocol or any sensory diet, it is meant to be applied frequently throughout the day, right? Not just once. So when I really try to get parents to understand why it's called a sensory diet and why it's provided regularly throughout the day, I refer back to food. So we have a regular diet, right? We eat breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner. And if we worked nights, we would eat at different times and our body would be expecting food at those times. We've trained our body to expect food, right? If we grazed all day and just snacked all day, we would never feel true hunger, right? Instead, because we eat at certain intervals throughout the day, our body gets, satiated, and then it slowly becomes hungry again, which cues us to eat. And then it's satiated and slowly becomes hungry again. But if we miss a meal, right? So say you miss lunch because something's going on and there's no food, or you can't, you're traveling and you miss a meal, and then you get to the point of really, really hungry. Sometimes you do something very silly, like order an entire pizza and eat the whole thing, right? And then you feel terrible, right? You feel so sick to your stomach, and you realize you have to go to the gym like 15 times this week to account for the entire pizza that you just ate. And parents laugh at this point and they're like, oh yeah, he made such a good point, because we've all done it, by the way. We've all eaten the entire poutine that we didn't want to eat. Everybody has done this. And so the link is there now with the parents for them to understand that, oh, so when I miss a meal, I feel really bad. And then I either overindulge in what I'm looking for, which is food, right? And the same thing can happen for sensory information. If we sit all day, right, for 6 hours at a table and not engage in any kind of movement activity, receive any other outside sensory input, we are going to be at a deficit. We are going to be seeking out sensory input that we are looking for. And we will often do so in very inappropriate ways, right? Because we're going to overindulge. And then we get hyperactive because we did too much movement, not enough to satiate, too much. So it's a really nice kind of portrayal of why we're looking at providing it regularly throughout the day. Kids who miss meals, adults who miss meals, we also don't feel good, right? So it's not just about the possible overindulgence, but it's our ability to concentrate, our ability to have a conversation, stay regulated. If we're hungry, often it's all we can think about. And that is the same with sensory input. If you don't receive the correct amount of sensory input throughout the day, you're going to have a hard time with concentration. You're going to have a hard time with finishing your work, engaging in conversations, all of those things that require us to be organized. Tolerating unpleasant input, right? Ding, ding, ding. That's something we all have to work on. So if we provide something like the brushing regularly throughout the day, the body is going to learn to expect it. And when it learns to expect it and you provide it, we aren't going to need to look for outside information because we know it's coming, right? We're not looking for snacks because we know we're going to have lunch in 20 minutes. And the effects of the sensory input that you're providing, whether it be brushing or other sensory diet activities, will over time last longer in the body, right? Because initially when you provide this input, the body is like, yes, this is so good, but it's so weird. I don't normally feel this good, right? It's not normal for them. So their body's going to get back to their typical state faster. With practice and over time, we want them to feel more comfortable in that organized state. So then the effects of the sensory input you've provided will last longer, right? That's our objective, is obviously for them to feel organized for longer periods of each day. The brushing, ideally, you provide it 5 times a day. Okay, I think it's even more than that, but I was always kind of explained 5 times a day. I don't think there's many families that can do that, but I always tell them to do it 5 times a day. I say, you're expected to do it 5 times a day. But I think it's really hard for you guys with your schedule to get 5 times in. I understand it's a really tricky thing. What if you were to do it 3 times a day, morning, after school, before bed, right? It fits in with the daily routine. It's easy to remember because those are natural transition times. and it can be part of your morning routine, after school routine, bedtime routine. They will all help with those transitions. And by saying, I know that you're supposed to do it 5 times, but I think it's more realistic to expect you to do it 3 times, they'll already feel like they're cheating the system. So they are more likely to do all 3 times, right? Because they think they're supposed to be doing 5. If you had said to do 3, then they'll probably do 2, right? And that's human nature. I'll be like, I worked out yesterday. I don't need to work out today. And it's normal, right? But if we present it well, they'll probably do the bare minimum because we've told them what they should be doing. And I hope that makes sense, how I present it and why I present it that way. Okay. Any questions about that? Let me just check the time. Boy, I know it's already 8 o'clock. The auditory systems. So we have 2 programs that we use. We have therapeutic listening, and now we have the Safe and Sound protocol, which is part of the ILS, interactive listening system. 2 different programs. There's also, I think that's actually called the listening program or the listening system. I'd have to look that one up. I'm not familiar with that one very much, but it's definitely come up in courses and conversations that I've had. The reason I initially learned to use therapeutic listening, right, 10 years ago, that long ago, was because it seemed to me more user-friendly than the interactive listening systems initially, because you didn't have to be in the clinic in order to do it. So 10 years ago, back in the day, you would have had to go into a clinic every day for a certain amount of time in order to wear the headphones and use the big music apparatus for the interactive listening system. For therapeutic listening, you had the headphones that you wore. Initially, it was a CD player, but now we've got the chip player, right? And it's worn here, and they do it at home. And they do it while they're doing any other activities in the home environment. So it's more cost effective for a lot of families because they don't have to pay for a therapy session in order to do it. And I forgot where my train of thought went. Oh, wow, guys, fatigue is killer. Anyway, the issue is that cost is still high because you have to purchase the equipment. Okay, so for therapeutic listening, since you're doing it at home, we can't be lending you the equipment or doing it with you in the clinic. You need to have your own equipment. So buying a headset, and the headphones are $150 new. So they're not cheap. Okay, and it has to be those specific ones. And when you do the therapeutic listening course, which we can provide for you, they explain why. It's an open headphone system, so both therapeutic listening and the SSP is what we'll call it, the Safe and Sound protocol, are open headphone systems, so they do not block out any sound. It's the music itself is meant to be more background noise, and you can hear people in your environment. You can hear if somebody talks to you, right? So even if you're using headphones for the Safe and Sound protocol that do have that feature, it needs to be turned off. So therapeutic listening, you have to use the specific headphones. You have to have the chip player, and you have to have access to the chips. We have the chips at both of the clinics, a good variety of modulated music and the quick shifts, which is kind of the secondary step. So modulated music means that it has been passed through a high-low filter. There's songs, familiar children's songs, there's Mozart, there's Baroque, so different Beethoven, different classical pieces. There's stuff like surf jams, which is all sorts of Beach Boys music, right? Really popular with teenagers. They have Strawberry Jams, which is one of the music selections, and it's just kind of relaxing, jazzy pieces. And then you have other ones that are more environmentally, nature sounds is what they're called, nature pop, nature sounds. They have music embedded with bird noises or cicadas, that's what cicadas, different noises that you would hear commonly in the environment. And the idea behind that, if you think about when you go walking, right, and you hear a bird, everybody looks up to try to pinpoint where is the bird, right? You hear somebody chopping wood, you're going to look around, where is somebody doing that? So natural noises in the environment increase our awareness of the environment because we look for them, right? It brings our awareness out of ourselves and to localizing the sound that you've heard.
Okay, so I have a quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, before we go too far from it. Mm-hmm. Therapeutic listening is the one that's easy to do, or is the one that's hard to do?
They are both easy in different ways.
Okay, because I'm not sure I understood. That one we lend it at home, the therapeutic listening?
Yeah, so they buy the equipment. So they have to buy their own headphones. So basically when I do it first in the clinic. I try it out. I see how they respond to it. Some of the kids won't even put the headphones on, right? That's how sensitive they are. One little boy that I did this with, it took me about 3 months of weekly sessions to get him to listen to a full 30 minutes on the headphones, right? And initially he wouldn't even put the headphones on. So it involved me holding the headphones close to his ears while he played a game so he could just hear the music, but it wasn't actually touching him. It then involved me placing them on and taking them off. It involved me putting them on my ears and saying, wow, this is so much fun. My turn, your turn. Oh, your turn is done. Great, my turn. Thank you so much. And we would go back and forth to slowly build up the tolerance. And then with this little guy, we would sit at the table and he really liked that ball game, right? With the one with the ball that goes down the ramps. And so I would let him play with it while he listened, right? So we would listen for 30 seconds and he would play and then he would take them off. And I'd say, okay, the game's finished. That's really good. And he'd want to play again. I'd say, okay, let's listen for a little longer. And I even built up the sound. I said, I'm going to count to 10 while you listen and then we can take them off, right? But I would count 1, 2, right? And I'd go really slow.
My counting.
Yeah, my counting, right? But initially I'd count fast and then I slowed it down once I knew that I could extend the time. And then I would go say, let's count to 20, and we'd count quicker, and then I'd count really slowly, and we'd slowly build it up to the point where it's been 3 or 4 minutes, right? And I really just built it up over time. But then he was able to tolerate 30 minutes, and then I was able to have them trial it at home without me, right? So if a kiddo can only wear it for 5 minutes, I'm not going to send it home as an activity. They're not ready. We need to build it up in our sessions, and then when we're able to listen to 30 minutes. Then we have a loaner set at each Pointe Claire and Outremont. So it's in a Tupperware container. And the loaner gets lent to the family. We have a sign-out sheet. So you would just ask somebody to show you where it is. And that is how they test. Can they manage twice a day for 30 minutes, twice a day for 2 weeks or 1 week, however long we're going to lend it to them.
And
right? So
there's no wiggle room. Like you can't be like, oh, once a day because the kiddo can't handle twice.
No. Well, you could say that, but there's no research to show that it has the same effect. In fact, they even say
is there research?
Well, I mean, the research is obviously done by people who have used the program, right? So a lot of it is done by VitalLinks, who are the provider of the program, right? Which, again, is it perfectly evidence-based? No. Right? Because it's not free of bias and all that kind of stuff, right? Like all of that information. However, the research shows that comparatively, if you follow the program properly twice a day, 30 minutes each time, 3 hours in between each listening experience, and each music selection is done for 2 weeks and needs to be appropriately chosen by your therapist to build up on each level, right? That's when we see the effects. Whereas if you miss one or more listening, I think you're allowed to miss one in a 2-week period. If you miss 2 or more, we need to redo that music selection. Okay, so it is important that the family can do this and commit to it. So I don't provide it to everybody, even if it would be a good fit, because the family won't be able to do it. So I'm not going to ask them to spend, $200 on headphones and a chip player in order to be able to do it if they're not going to do it at home. I don't feel bad asking a family to spend that kind of money for a 2, 3, 4 month program, only because those headphones are compatible with anything, right? They're compatible with an iPad or used to be portable DVD players, all that kind of stuff, right? It's compatible with everything else, so they can still use them. They're very comfortable. And those things are durable, okay? The Sennheiser headphones, I once had a kid slam them in the van door. They fell apart. I put them back together and it still worked. Okay, like they've been covered in shaving cream and it's still like I've had kids stomp on them, throw them across the room. They still work. So you get what you pay for. And in that sense, I have confidence in the fact that a lot of our kids who are not gentle, right, won't break it. Some kids do. Some kids chew on the wire. I think that is the most easy way to break the system, is by chewing on the wire. But now it's easier to keep it out of the way, because before you used to have it down on a CD player, but now it's all attached up here on the headset. Okay, I could go into great detail. It's a 2-day course, so I'm not going to explain to you guys how to use it, because that's doing the course. But I just wanted to touch on when we would use that one versus the other one. So using a therapeutic, yeah.
Sorry. But how exactly does it work? Like why does it have that impact? And
Yes.
long of a question, but
I meant to like pull up a picture. So the therapeutic listening and the Safe and Sound protocol have similar ideation behind it, but different systems that they're activating, right? The way that it's taught and explained. So when you think about therapeutic listening, the modified music has been passed through a high-low filter, so it hits initially a lot of the lower bass sounds and tones, and you can hear it. Like when you listen, right, it's much more body oriented. Like, you know, when you listen to heavy bass, you can feel it vibrating in your body, right? You feel the sound, not just hear the sound. And now I'm trying to think, how can I like accurately describe it as they do? It's beautifully explained when you do the course, but basically the music is chosen because of the effect it is already shown to have on emotion, self-regulation, auditory sensitivity. And then on top of that, the modulation will create an alerting response. An alerting response is something that you see kind of when a child is playing something, right? And then they go like this. And then they come back into task, right? And we've all done it. We'll all be into something and we'll hear in our music, right? And we all kind of look like we're looking for where the noise is coming from, even though we can't see our ears. But yeah, it's that tuning in, that alerting response. So the music will sometimes get really, really quiet in one ear and it'll get louder in the other, right? But it's meant to be background music. So you almost don't hear it until there's a change, which is very similar to when you're in class and you shouldn't hear it. You should be able to tune out all the background sound while you're working until there's a sudden change. Somebody calling your name, right? Everybody being really quiet, somebody yelling across the room, and that should get your alertness, your orienting response, all right? That's a very simplified way of doing it. The scientific information behind it is really interesting. There's a book at Pointe-Claire. It's one of the ones that has Black Spiral. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one provided by the therapeutic listening training that I did. It's not provided anymore now. Like, you know, everything's mailed to you because you usually do it over the internet, but I did it in person, and I received the book as part of it, the manual. So they have a really nice chapter on it. The Safe and Sound protocol is different. So the Safe and Sound protocol, I'm really enjoying that right now because I do find it easier to administer. The reason I find it easier is that it's only 5 days, right? The other one, you have to switch the music every 2 weeks and you have to do usually about 3 months worth of music, right? There's a good number. You're not going to just listen to 1 or 2 music selections. They have different profiles. So there's 3 profiles, and then you have different jobs done by each of the music selections. And all of this is written down, right? So it's not difficult to figure out because you're told what each of the sounds work on, or each of the music selections work on, and what each of the music selections, where each of the music selections are placed in a profile. Okay, so you would start with really certain ones and build your way up to the next set and then the final set. You would really build your way up in a hierarchy, and it's quite logical. The Safe and Sound protocol is 5 days. The music is the same across for everybody. You have a child program, I guess, a child program and an adult program. And the music selections are, you know, Disney music and common music that you would know for the kids. And for adults, like they have Taylor Swift in there, right? Like there's really good, they have Rent, songs from the Rent soundtrack, Simon Garfunkel, like there's a lot of really good common music that we know. And some of the music is even repeated. There's my favorite Whitney Houston song is in there, right? There's a wide variety. And it's listened to in the specific order. Our way of adjusting it is by cutting down. So ideally you would listen to 1 hour a day for 5 days. But maybe that's too intense for some people, especially for some of the kids that we work with. So instead of listening to it that way, I would choose to do 30 minutes over 10 days or 20 minutes, right, over 15. Like I would really cut it down to allow the body longer to adjust for it. These are the kind of things that they will cover in the training. So same kind of thing, we have access to this training, right? When we're ready to do it, let's do it, because you cannot easily and properly use it until you understand the system. The SSP, what's nice about it is that it is on your phone. So you used to have to rent a system, and then we would lend it out, and it would cost, you know, $1,500 a year for the rental fee for the headphones and the player, but only one person could use it at a time. Now it's the same amount of money, so it's about $1,500 a year, guys. It's not cheap, but we have every family download the app. I have a dashboard that we use, and we set up an account for them, and the therapist is able to monitor it through their account. They download it for free. It's a free download, and they download the music. And so they can listen to it at home with any set of earphones that goes over the ears. We do not recommend earbuds. If the family really can't afford and can't borrow over the head earphones, they'll use the earbuds. But it's not often the case, right? It's ideal that it be over the ear headphones. You can also do it, both systems can be done over speakers, especially for children under the age of 2. But again, it's not exactly the same input, right? The most efficient way is through over-the-ear headphones. Noise canceling turned off. The Safe and Sound protocol. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering, to do either of these, do you need to like take a whole training workshop? It's not like any of the therapists could do these?
So
or...
you need to understand why you're doing it. The therapeutic listening is a 2-day workshop. The Safe and Sound protocol probably is about 4 hours. It's much faster, okay? I'm really happy that I did the therapeutic listening training first. So when I learned about the Safe and Sound protocol, I already had all that background knowledge, right? The reason that the therapeutic listening is 2 days is first they do the theory, then they do the application, right? So it's 2 different, I guess, systems that they visit. And then the Safe and Sound protocol, it's about the polyvagal theory. So Dr. Stephen Porges, I think that's pronounced it properly, he's the one who pioneered the whole polyvagal theory. So your vagus nerve is the nerve that starts in your brain, goes all the way down through your body to your gut, and it touches on all the organs, right? So this is the one that we feel when we're having, nervousness and anxiety and fear and worry. All of these feelings are a vagal response, right? And then by activating the vagus nerve system, right, which is why they call it the polyvagal theory, you are then able to dampen those feelings and kind of bring yourself up out of it. So it's a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system adjustment. We can use either of them for auditory desensitization. Some kids are going to respond better to one versus the other. Some kids are going to accept shorter periods of time versus longer periods of time. And some therapists are going to be better trained in certain areas. I'm going to mute you mostly because...
Sorry.
That's okay. Auditory processing, I so many other noises, I can't do it. And so literally Google polyvagal theory. It's really fascinating. I'm not going to get into it because I was just checking the time. It's already 8:15. But you can look up the Safe and Sound protocol. I can send you the link, but literally if you just look it up, it'll take you to the page that explains it. And they have a nice little video on the polyvagal theory. I'm liking it because it also has a lot of use for the social engagement system. So a lot of our kids who have social issues, who do not easily form relationships and make connections, this is really applicable to that. Right? When you think about therapeutic listening, they have stuff for auditory processing issues. They have stuff for, same thing, relationship building. They even have one that is often called the poop CD, right? Mozart for modulation, because it actually mimics circadian rhythms. And so a lot of our kids, when they listen to it, actually start to get a little bit better regulated. And that is shown through our elimination. Right, so a lot of our kids who are really constipated, we do the poop CD, right, or the poop chip, the music chip now, and I've seen it work. It's really cool. Not for everybody, right, but it is one of those tools that we can try. I tried the bilateral coordination quick shift with one of my kids once, and he was really struggling to cut with scissors. And he was a toe walker, not crossing midline. Bilateral coordination was an issue, right, in a big way. A really bright kid, and he was trying so hard. He was 5 and trying so hard to cut with scissors. And I was just sitting there and I was like, I wonder what would happen, right? So I went and got the music and I popped it on his head and The first one in the bilateral quick shifts is the Pink Panther soundtrack, right? It's great. And he started listening to it,
movie.
right? And then he just started cutting, right?
Wow.
And dad and I are like this because dad was there and he's like, all right, and I'm sitting there going, cool. Didn't think that was going to happen just like that, right? And dad's like, how do I get this? I want this for home, right? Obviously, because this is a miracle worker as far as he's concerned. It was the right music at the right time, and all the foundational pieces had been done, and it just allowed him access to all the work we were doing. So the way I explain the listening programs is that it's not a magic fix. It's not a magic button that if you just listen, it's going to do all the work on its own, right? Especially with a therapeutic listening, which we do over a longer period of time. I like to explain it that it increases our body and our mind and our sensory systems. Oh God, what's the word? Oh, I'm just having vocabulary. Receptiveness, right? So all the stuff that we're doing, all these big motor and sensory activities, right? The big work that we're doing is going to work over the long run anyway. However, if we pair it with the therapeutic listening program, it increases the body's receptiveness to it, and we will see results faster. And it's almost like it opens up the body's ability to take in that information that we're providing and organize it more effectively. So it's paired with movement and exercise and the therapeutic activities that we're doing anyway. Cool. So when you think about auditory desensitization, right, all of the cues that we already gave for caregivers, we're going to look at sensory diet activities, so providing self-regulating strategies throughout the day, which we've already touched on in all of our self-regulation discussions. And then on top of it, you have your auditory listening programs that really target the listening stuff first. And then when you think about it, you start usually at the base, which is our lower frequencies, right? Those are the ones that are easier for people to tune into. The higher range frequencies, like the sounds of voices, are often the ones that make us very uncomfortable when we are sensitive to sounds, right? Or it is the very low frequencies that are loud, like blow dryers, hand dryers, vacuums, those kind of sounds. And so we want to provide the type of input that we are trying to assimilate to. And if we have a kid who's having a hard time tuning into voices and building relationships, there's higher level music that you can use in these situations. For the therapeutic listening, it's the fine tuning system, which is an advanced therapeutic listening course. And for the SSP, part of it is actually already in tuned to it. So they want to basically start in the lower frequencies, and by day 5, they brought you to the higher frequencies. Usually by day 3 is the hardest one on the body, and then it allows you access to the higher level music. Now they've created a 3-tiered music response, but I haven't done the course on that yet, so I will not talk about it because I don't know enough about it to discuss it. It's, next week's problem, or hopefully next week, the week after. All right. Questions? Go. I know Laura has like a bunch of questions.
No, I'm actually pretty good. I was just wondering because I feel like I'm really not at the point where I should be learning the safe and sound, just because in terms of like time priority versus like learning other things, it's coming a bit later. Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering is 2 things for my kiddos that may benefit from it. How would we do it? Because I know it was discussed for a few kiddos, and we brought it up for Matthew. We may have brought it up for like a few people here and there. What is a way that can, like, is there a way that you can kind of, or that somebody else can oversee that part? Like how?
Yep. So
what do you envision?
Myself and Sam are both trained in it. So Alexia did the training as well. She had some time. And so I've been doing it over Zoom with a lot of my kids, because obviously I'm not coming into the clinic very often right now. And ideally it's done at home anyway. So you and I could talk about the client and see if they have enough strategies already put into their system in order to do it. If we do the safe and sound protocol without having a sound relationship with the person that you're doing it, right? So they have to trust the person. So either we would do it in a session where you were there and I would be on a screen, right? And they have that firm relationship with you, and maybe it's someone I've met before, so I'm not a stranger, or with Alexia that they've seen in passing, right? She can sit in on the session there. That relationship is super important. It allows the person the ability to trust that you will recognize the signs of them being overwhelmed by the music and stop it at that time, right? Because it is possible to become overwhelmed. I did it with a mom. I did it with one of my kids, and then I had his mom do it as well. And I spoke to mom about it, and she said, on one of the days, and she did 30 minutes as well instead of an hour, because she also had big trauma in her history. There was a lot of anxiety and stuff that I was sensing that was maybe transitioning to the kids, but mom was the source, not the kids, right? So the kiddo did really well on the listening. He made some beautiful gains, started having really nice conversations, whereas before they were very one-sided. It was interesting shifts. The mom was telling me that when she was listening on what would be day 2 of the music, right, the end of it, she got really sad, like really sad, like crying, right, to the music, but for no reason, and there was no explanation for it. And then on the day 3, which is the harder day for the listening, she was so exhausted she almost fell asleep while listening, right? Like she went to bed at like 9 o'clock that night. She just went to bed right after she was finished. And that's one of the things that you read about or you listen to in the training. I reread about it in my notes because I was curious, and I was like, yep, that's one of the expected repercussions from the music. It's really heavy on the system. So when you think about the reason to do the training, is it's more to be able to recognize who are the correct candidates. How do we set up the program so they have the right supports? And how do we recognize when it's too much? Because if we let them keep going through too much, they're going to get completely dysregulated. That's the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? We really need to make sure that they have good supports in place. It's kind of like if we're trying to reduce the meltdowns that a child is having when there's all these auditory inputs that they don't like. And the meltdown is their way of protecting themselves by getting out of the situation or providing their own noise to block out the noise that they don't like, as an example. And then we provide them with the safe and sound protocol, and they start having fewer meltdowns, but we don't provide them with another support in order to stop it by saying, well, you could just talk to someone and say, I really don't like that noise right now. Could you turn it off? Right? We have to provide them with other options. Otherwise, we've taken away the support that they were using and we've left them with nothing, which could leave them a hot mess really fast.
So I have a couple more questions. Based on what you were talking about, it's being great for a kid that was cutting, for the social aspect, for quite a few things. So that's a lot. That kind of seems like everyone, but we don't do it with everyone, obviously. So where are you like, this kiddo would benefit from it?
Auditory processing. If there's anything auditory, my thinking goes right away to doing the safe and sound protocol, right? Or the therapeutic listening, right? Because obviously doing sound-based programs are going to affect our auditory system. Then when I think about other kids who might benefit, it's usually when I've tried a lot of the other strategies that we already use to improve balance, bilateral coordination, handwriting, cutting, self-regulation, tactile defensiveness, right? We have all of these other tools that we've talked about throughout all of these sessions. When I've tried a number of them and I've seen some progress, but maybe not enough or not as much as I would want, then I think, okay, what else do I have in my toolbox that can maybe improve our receptiveness to all the work that we've been doing, right? What can give me a little bit of a boost? And that's when I'll think maybe I'll try the listening programs. Because like I said, it's not meant to be done in isolation. It's meant to be done with the other programs. So by doing it, now maybe the kiddo who got 50% towards their goal, maybe they'll hit 75% because they'll have more of a body reaction, more organization from the input we're providing while we're also providing the music.
Okay. Then you said when they're ready for it. So other than us having a strong relationship, they trust us, we can tell the signs that's difficult for them. Like what point in the session, what point in the time frame would you go, yeah, they're ready for it?
When they can listen for 30 minutes to an hour, right? They can wear the headphones. Usually I've tried it in the sessions first. I don't just like throw it out there and have the parents take it home, right? Even with the safe and sound protocol over Zoom, I know the kids that I'm doing it with. I haven't done it with any kids that were not known to me. So I already knew that they could wear the headphones. In fact, one of the kids I've done it with did the therapeutic listening program already. He's just getting sick of the music. So we're trying a different approach. Because he just listens too much, and he's very much a kid that doesn't like it when it's overused. So being ready for it is very much on the sense that either they have the capacity to do the full program as expected, the family has the capacity to do it, so now they are, you know, invested and ready to do the listening programs at home, and you feel like you know the child well enough that, yeah, this is the right step, we're ready to be putting this into practice now. It's a feeling, and don't ever naysay your gut feeling about stuff, right? Because often it will lead you to try things that aren't logical but work, and it's cool. But again, it's not evidence-based all the time, right? Because you're like, well, this might work in this situation, right? And like when I did the thing for the smelling, I didn't have anybody tell me to do that. It wasn't a set program. It was something that it was logical, and my gut kind of told me, hey, let's give this a try. Same with the therapeutic listening for the cutting when I tried it. It's just one of those things that I knew it worked on bilateral coordination, and I felt that he was having a really hard time coordinating helper hand and worker hand to get the paper to do what it was supposed to, and the scissors to do what it was supposed to. Does that kind of answer your question? It's totally like
It does.
in a way, right? It's really
Last-
based on having a feeling and then having the logic behind it that, hey, I've tried a bunch of stuff. What can I try now that we haven't tried yet? Because the other stuff worked kind of, or didn't work, or worked sometimes.
Okay. Last question. Can I do it? Not the whole, not necessarily the training. I'm a bit skeptical of how listening program could do so much. So I want to try it. I want to see for myself.
Yeah, you can totally do it. I'll send you an email with let me write it down. Hold on. Laura SSP. I'll send you an email to set it up, and I'll send you the email on how to download it, and you can do it. I did it to myself 3 weeks ago. I did it with a friend of mine. Laura, if you're going to do it to yourself, I want you to check in with me just to say, hey, I'm doing the listening, and yeah, no problem, right? Or, whoa, I feel really funny today, and then I'll call you, right? Just so you have this. No,
Fair enough.
Right? Because like
support, of course, 100%.
The support is there. This mom that did it, right? I called her and I was like, hey, how's it going? She's like, I'm really glad you called. Yesterday I was really sad about I was really tired, and she was telling me all this. I'm like, so those were the days that you could have reached out to me and told me that you were feeling that way. And so that you felt reassured that it was normal to feel that way as a response to the music. Right. And so,
okay.
But the end of that conversation, she was like, thank you so much for reaching out. Like, this is a mom who, like, our relationship is secure, right? There's no way that she'll ever not want to come back to therapy, because she's like, wow, this is a therapist who cares enough to give me a call on their free time. And I do care enough, right? Because I want to make sure that if I'm providing it, it's done properly.
It'll work.
Right, exactly. And that they feel good at the end of it. So me, I didn't feel many changes, but I'm also, even in my tired state and stressed out state, pretty regulated, right? Like, I have my moments, but I'm not an anxious person. I am sensitive to sound, but not to the point that it causes me to have meltdowns, right? It causes me to be angry at the person who left the TV on at like 90% volume, i.e. Daniel, who's deaf. Okay. Like, we fight about that. Like, when you get in the car and the last person left the radio on full blast, and you turn on the car and you're like, ah, right? That happens to me all the time. That angers me. But otherwise, I'm okay. Like,
perfect, because I totally have like anxiety edges, so I feel like this could be great.
It could be super interesting. Before you do the listening, what I'll do is I'll send you my notes on it. I'd like you to read it. Just read my notes instead of doing the training, because it'll kind of explain. So, Kins, I can send it to you too, and you can have a read, and you can try this also if you want to. It's, the good news is we paid for this yearly subscription. Anybody can use it. It's great. And like, people have actually reached out to me just for access to the program, right? Because we're listed as a provider because I've done the training. So
yeah, we got an intake call the other day who was just looking for safe and sound protocol.
Yeah, and then I will do the call and explain that it cannot be done in isolation, right? And we'll talk about why and how we can then do it over time. but yeah, so I'll send you guys the notes and you can have a look at the website. The website has a nice video that's just like a general overview. And then Laura, it'll be cool, like keep track of it. Keep track of how you feel before, during, and after. That would be super interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be really, really cool. And I think it's like, especially since I tend to get, anyways, I think it'll be fun. Also, maybe I'll drag my boyfriend down with me. We'll see.
I want Daniel to do it very much. He said he would. It's just been a matter of him actually doing it. Alex did it. So she enjoyed it. She was like, oh, I don't know if I feel any different because my stepdaughter has anxiety, test anxiety, ADHD, concentration issues. But at the time that we were doing it, she was picking at pimples, picking at her skin, right? Like lovely ticks that she has. And she hasn't been doing that lately. So cool.
Well, if I less frustrated at the use of vacuums, then it's
a win-win, right?
Then it's
exactly.
Low tolerance to vacuum and hair dryer. So who knows? Maybe it'll be
auditory sensitivity. We all notice stuff about ourselves when we start learning about it. It's fascinating.
Just movement of air. Movement of air drives me insane.
Okay, so we need to integrate your Moro system too. We're gonna
really? Is that what that is?
That's part of it, yeah. Like for sure, it's your startle response, right? Like when something makes you feel uncomfortable, you go, right? And you take in this deep breath. Like you don't do the full thing. Sometimes you'll be startled, right? And we all do this. And that's in that pattern, that Moro pattern, right? Yeah. But that's cortisol through the roof, right? Our stress hormone, and then we're in high alert, and it's not easy to get that system dampened. So super cool and insightful. So I'll send you that when we get off so that we don't forget, and keep track, and then like tell us about it next week, because the same kind of thing. It is meant to be done over 5 days, right? So 1 hour each day. If you do it for an hour and you feel like it's too much, right? Or you feel like you're getting overwhelmed, stop at that time. So if it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, and then the next time you'll finish it up, and then you'll do smaller chunks of time. Okay, that'll be the way to manage it. Super interesting. Any other questions? We covered a lot of info again today. It's kind of overwhelming. I really like the listening programs, and like you said, like it's almost a lot thinking about using it, but they're so effective with so many of our kids that it's worthwhile when you're ready doing the training. So it's just another tool you have access to, right? And for some kids it doesn't do anything, and then other kids it's magic, right? And it's so cool to watch the difference and to be able to pick up on it. It's just like how the brush works really well for some kids, and other kids are like, it feels okay, right? But both kids maybe had a similar profile, so it didn't explain why they would have presented differently when you presented the information. It's just that fun, unique, we are working with individual people scenario. Sound good? I think I'll call it a night. It's 8:30. We did a full hour anyway. I always say we're going to shorten it up, and we never do.
Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. So next week we don't have one, right? Because I have that other course. What I'm going to do is I'll have a look, because I know that Ariella would really like to participate in them, and she can't on Wednesdays anymore. So I might try to move it to Tuesdays or Thursdays. So if either of those days do not work for you, let me know. Or if you prefer one of those days, let me know. And then I just have to look and see which day works with homework for the
I'm usually in session.
Which days?
I'm usually in session until 7 p.m. on Tuesday.
Okay. So Thursday would be better.
And what's the other day you said?
Thursday?
Thursday, it depends if I have it might be the same issue. For now, I have no one for now. Okay. At Laval. Mm-hmm. For now, I only have somebody at 3:30. Okay. And then for the next couple of weeks at least. Or for the next week.
So what we'll do is I might look at moving it to Thursdays, and I might look at putting it at 7:30. So it gives everybody a little bit more time to get home, eat. It gives me a little bit more time to put the babies down, so I'm not late all the time, right? Because that's annoying. Not cool for you guys either. So I'm thinking that's what I'll do, but I'll confirm. All right. So next week, taking a week off, get other stuff done. I'll do this course, and then I'll be able to report back on the cool stuff we talked about. And then I want to cover reflexes. Just the basics of reflexes. Okay.
Oh, that would be cool. I have a kiddo the mom asked me, what's a Moro reflex? I'm like, we'll talk about that next session.
Yeah, I'll send you a cool video, YouTube video to watch. I'll send it to everybody. Okay, and it explains, I'll send you the link and you look at it, and the person who's talking about it explains the Moro reflex. They explain the difference between the fear paralysis and the Moro. It's really nice. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
I'll see you all hopefully soon.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too. I gotta figure out how to turn this
Bye.
off and stop my sharing. There we go.